When you got to the house, went in the back door, do you remember where you went?
I got upstairs, I know that, but I don't know which route I took.
Okay. And when you went upstairs, do you remember where you went when you got to the top of the stairs?
The door to the bedroom was closed, but the next door was open, so I went in that door.
Okay. And where does that door lead to?
To what they call a TV room, but it's part of the bedroom suite on that side of the house.
Okay. And was anybody up at that time that you saw?
No.
And this is the back or the second door to the bedroom, which is the door that she came in. She had the cover of the lamp here. She was coming in a dark corner. The windows were on the other side of the room.
What did, when you went into the TV room, what was the next thing that you did?
The TV room door was wide open, and then the door to their bedroom was part open. It wasn't closed, it was like ajar.
Okay. And did you go into that, did you then go into their bedroom?
Yes.
So then their heads would have been right there in the doorway she comes in on.
They were in
Right.
bed, sound asleep. It was 5:30 on a Sunday morning. They'd been out the night before with friends, having dinner. Elizabeth Broderick stood right next to the bed, literally almost right on top of them. And without hesitation, and those are her words, after she entered the bedroom, without hesitation, she opened fire and gunned them down. She pointed the gun at them and she pulled the trigger 5 times. And this is not an automatic, this is a revolver. You have to pull the trigger each time in order to shoot this gun. And you will see that it's not a particularly easy trigger to pull. And you'll also see that every one of her shots was aimed to kill.
Okay. And what did you do when you went into their bedroom?
Well, the motion that I made, although I don't think it was a big motion, the movement that I made into their bedroom woke them up, and they moved, and somebody screamed, "Call the police," and I said, "No!" And I just fired the gun, and this big noise went off, and then I grabbed the phone and got the hell out of there. But I wasn't even in that room. I mean, it just was an explosion. Just, I moved, they moved, the gun went off, and it was like, ah! And it was that fast.
I don't know what was going on. I heard this humongous noise and what seemed like a flash or something, and the gun was empty. I don't have any recollection of doing this for the first shot, for the 5 shots, or thereafter when the gun was empty. But the gun was empty.
This is a scale diagram of the bedroom. 2 different pictures of the same bedroom. When the defendant entered the bedroom, she stood right about here. Linda was basically lying flat on her back in the bed. The first shot at her went right into her chest, right above her heart, right exactly where you'd shoot someone if you were intending to kill them. That shot went completely through her body and into the bed underneath her. That shot in itself would have killed her. It was fatal. She shot Dan, who was most probably lying on his side with his back to her, because she shot him right in the middle of the back. And he either tried to frantically dive away as she was shooting at him, or he simply fell off the bed in response to being shot. A second shot at him missed and went right into the wall beyond him. Linda had also reacted to being shot by trying to roll away or get away from the defendant. But the defendant shot at her 2 more times. One shot just barely missed her head, went into the nightstand right next to the bed. The other shot was right on target, right in the middle, the back of her head.
Wow.
That shot exploded through her brain and killed her instantly. They both were shot in the back as they were trying to get away. She had to aim at Linda. She had to change her aim to get Dan. She had to change her aim again to get Linda again.
Yeah, those are good points.
I don't remember seeing Linda or Dan at all. It was just blurred.
How do you know that Linda moved towards Dan and Dan moved towards the phone if you didn't see it?
Because all I'm trying to do is explain what I thought happened then. Is that Linda, who was closest to me, that I know now from pictures, moved toward Dan, and Dan moved toward the phone, and she yelled, "Call the police," and that's what was going on there, and that's how I knew the phone was over there.
If you had any question whatsoever about the fact that they were moving, it is true that they were moving away from you, correct?
Yes?
And what about moving away from you was so frightening or startling that it caused you to start shooting your gun?
When I entered the room, I was about to say something to them. They said first, and they started moving, and I just panicked. It was not a thought process.
You brought the gun for a show of force. You brought the gun to make him listen
talk
to
to
you.
him, right.
But when you entered the room, you didn't use the gun for a show of force. You didn't use the gun to say, "Hold it, I want to talk to you, Buster." You shot.
I didn't have
Buster.
a chance.
You didn't have a chance? What do you mean you didn't have a chance?
Because it all happened so fast. I'm telling you, it wasn't a thought process. I moved, they moved, the gun went off, and it was over that fast.
I don't know.
The bullet that
You know,
hit Dan
I
Want to
think
play
her
some more and
intentions-
talk after, or?
on the
Yeah.
floor
All right.
had pierced through his
I want to wait
but
and
he
see what you
didn't
say at the
die
end.
instantly. As he laid there on the floor, wounded, he tried to reach for the phone that was on the nightstand next to the bed.
We're almost
Presumably
done.
to call for help. Elizabeth Broderick was now out of bullets. It was a 5-shot gun. She had shot all 5 of them, 2 at Dan and 3 at Linda. But Dan was still alive and reaching for the phone. It's at this point that the evidence will show how clearly the
Listen.
defendant's intent was to kill these 2 people. Because when she saw that Dan was still alive, she didn't pick up the phone herself and call 911 and say, "Oh my God, I've just shot 2 people, come quick, what have I done?" She didn't just panic and run out of the house. What she did was to walk all the way around the bed, over to where Dan was lying, to where, as she later told someone, she could hear him gurgling in his own blood. And what she did was she picked up the phone and ripped it out of the wall, literally tearing the cord in half. And she did it, in her own words, so he couldn't save himself. There would be no chance to call for help. She then walked out of the room, dumping the broken phone at the top of the stairs. And when she left, this is a photograph of the scene. Linda lay dead in a pool of blood. Dan Broderick was left to essentially suffocate in his own blood and die anywhere from a couple of minutes to as much as a half hour later.
God, I'm sorry for
The shot
anybody
that
who
he
didn't
took
want to see
actually
that.
was very similar to the shot that President Reagan took through his lung. But President Reagan was rushed to the hospital and he survived. Dan didn't have that opportunity. Not once in the minutes to hours after Elizabeth Broderick left them there, while she was busily calling people to tell them what she had done, not once did she express any remorse for what she'd done, or did she make any effort to get them help. She went over there wanting them dead, and she made sure that they died.
Do you remember where you went after that?
Well, I had nowhere to go. I mean, I was afraid Dan was after me. I was afraid when I went into that house of confronting Dan, and then when I left, I thought he was after me. And so I thought, oh man, you can't go home because he's going to have called the police, and the police are going to be waiting at my house, and I didn't want to scare the boys and everything, so I didn't go home. So I ended up at a phone in Claremont, at a gas station in Claremont.
On that date,
early in the morning, do you recall receiving a phone call?
Yes,
What time was it approximately?
approximately around 7 a.m.
Did you answer the phone call?
Yes, I did.
Who was in the line?
It was my mom.
What did she tell you?
She said she was in trouble and she needed my help.
What else did she say?
She told me that she shot my dad. She shot the son of a bitch. And she wanted to come to my house. And I told her to come.
I called Lee and I told her I was in trouble or something. I don't remember really what I told her. But I said that I'll try and get to your house. And if I don't get to your house, that means they've arrested me because the Suburban is real big and there weren't many cars out on a Sunday morning. And it has a load 'em up license plate. That's what it says. So it'd be real easy to get pulled over. And I said, if I don't arrive, honey, it's because the police got me. But I'll try and get to your house. So I went to Lee's house. And the reason for that is Dan didn't know where Lee lived. So if he was sending the cops to get me, he couldn't send them to Lee's house because he didn't know where Lee lived. Nobody knew where Lee lived except me.
Did,
Interesting.
when you got to Lee's house, how would you describe how you felt?
Well, whenever, especially this day, I felt bad that I was involving her, but at the same I tried to pretend like everything was okay. I guess, I don't know. I got there, I remember I took my camera out of the car, I gave her my camera, and I told her that I shot this gun at Dan's house and I have to go give myself into the police. So I took off all my jewelry and stuff, but I know I did that, but I don't remember doing it. And then I sent Lee from her apartment to go check on Danny and Rhett, because I was worried that the cops were there and that the boys were afraid and stuff. So Jason and Lee went to check on Danny and Rhett.
Did you eventually turn yourself in that day?
Yes.
Oh, she turned herself in?